The spires and old walls are possibly the second largest mystery that Tyranny presents us with. They are buildings so ancient that nobody knows who built them, how long ago, or indeed how or why they built them, because there's nothing else on Terratus that comes even close to touching the literally monumental dimensions of either. The plot point or trope of an ancient civilization which had vastly more advanced knowledge, capabilities and or technology than what's currently possible is a time-honored trope of both fantasy and sci-fi narratives, which, as far as I'm concerned, those two are fundamentally the same genre. But that's a different video. However, much like with everything else in the narrative of Tyranny, even this ancient civilization trope is executed to a high degree. You get introduced to the spires first. These are present all throughout Terratus and are of incredible height and impossible to fathom how they were built. They are mainly used as landmarks by locals and as navigational aids by sailors, because nobody has ever been capable of ascending them, and their bases are just hollow chambers with decorative tiles on the floor. Until, that is, your Fatebinder character resolves the edict that you also declared in the chamber of the local spire, called the Mountain Spire. And that immense conflux of energy wakes the spire up, for lack of a better word. It wakes it up by activating the floor pattern and teleporting everyone inside to the very top. Nobody even knew the spires had a walkable top till this moment, and they are so tall that the air is cool and thin, the game describing it as unsatisfying to your lungs. And that is a decent clue as to the actual height of these things, because most people will start feeling the effects of altitude from around 2,500 meters, which is 2.5 kilometers. That's insanely high. For reference, the current tallest building in our world is only 828 meters. And this assumed height also fits with the observations of your party members, who refer to the surroundings they see as if they were looking down at a map. Despite their height and obvious age, the spires aren't indestructible, or at least they aren't impervious to the damages of time. The realm of Terratus has geologically changed since they were built, with some spires having been destroyed by new mountain ranges appearing and some others being swallowed by the seas. If we were to compare this to our world, it could mean they are millions of years old. However, seeing as how Terratus is a world filled with magics, or rather powerfully destructive magics at that, and I am talking about the edicts here, we can't really use this as a means of placing them at some clear distance in time. When you can set something on never-ending magical fire, creating mountains or moving coastlines on a whim doesn't sound impossible. But that is the reason they were built. Magic, I mean. Once you wake up your second spire, you become aware of a magical connection having been created between your character and the spires, because the spires themselves are connected to each other through mysterious methods of magics yet to be understood. This connection also gives you an awareness of your growing reputation and recognition amongst the people living in the regions where your spires now reside. You start to gain an intuitive understanding of the immense power these monuments concentrate, and Landry mentions he thinks you are now mystically attuned to them. This attunement and awareness become more important as the story unfolds, but that's likely a different lore video. The idea being that you start feeling the world through the perspective of the spires, and get an inkling of them actually having a sense of self-awareness somehow. Quite soon after you wake up the first spire, you get to enter a portion of the Oldwalls, which, like their name implies, are some still standing portions of walls that are really old and that are themselves higher and larger than any other building on Terratus, with the exception of the spires, of course. It is said the Oldwalls were present at least for centuries before the current societies built their cities, which themselves are at least several hundreds of years old, seeing as how we are in year 431 of Kairos' campaign to conquer the entirety of Terratus. But this only means that Kairos has been actively conquering the world for the past 400 plus years. What they were conquering had to have been around for at least several other hundreds of years before that, and I would argue even more. Judging by the time span needed for the conquest, we can assume that resistance, when there was resistance, was fierce and well organized, which implies the societies that were conquered had been around for a long time in order to develop their power and organizational capabilities. So, as far as I'm concerned, the Spires and Oldwalls are at least 1,000 years old, and I would safely say at least 1,500 just by eyeballing the development and evolution of societies in our world. Now, of course, the presence of magic potentially fudges those estimations up, but I have a different counter-argument to that, which I'll discuss towards the conclusion. The Oldwalls are a peculiar presence on Terratus because they aren't always physically connected to the spires, but the two are never very far apart. In fact, the first spire you wake up, the Mountain Spire, which also features what can only be described as a magical machine, is one such spire that is separated from the Oldwalls. What makes the Oldwalls a bit extra intriguing is not only that they function as dungeons in the game, but that from the story perspective, you are introduced to the Oldwalls through the lens of Kairos' laws. Kairos' system of laws is the fundamental narrative frame for the setting and the game. And to know more about Kairos, who is the largest mystery in Terratus, and their laws, I have a special lore video about them in the pinned comment. The gist of the matter is that entering the Oldwalls is forbidden by Kairos' law. At the same time, there are no such laws relating to entering the spires. Now, here's the thing. Those who do enter the Oldwalls almost never return, because they're either killed by ancient traps or more likely by the denizens of the Oldwalls. The Bane exist all throughout Terratus, however they seem to congregate within and around the Oldwalls. They are dangerous magic energy entities that attack humans on sight and are called so because of their preference towards attacking those who wield either magic or magically imbued items, their entire name being Mage Bane. There is something about the Oldwalls that attracts them, and whoever built them, I've started calling them the Spire-Builders, were aware of this, seeing as how you will find Bane traps all throughout. Putting those two things together, we can start painting a picture of what maybe was the role of the Oldwalls. My current theory is that the Oldwalls work like a sort of conduit that pierces into the realm of magic and funnels the energies into the spires. As per one of your letter exchanges with the Fatebinder Myothes, she describes magic as a sea engulfing or covering the world and the spires as spinning and churning the magic. Continuing to say that a spell cast with moderate power around the spires will have a much greater result. Basically, the Oldwalls act as giant cables, taking magical energy from wherever it springs from and directing it into the spires, which focus it and where it can then be processed into edicts via the earlier mentioned magical machine found on top of the Mountain Spire. Now, seeing as how the Mountain Spire is not physically linked to any Oldwalls means that whatever they do can happen without physical contact, which we get a sense of whenever the game describes how your Fatebinder feels the spires and how they can also sense the surrounding energy through the spires. Becoming attuned to the spires gives one a lot of power indeed, and becoming known as the owner of the spires then gives one influence over those in the region of said spires. This is how and why, after gaining enough reputation, notoriety, and spires, you can eventually enact your own edicts via the spire machine. Back to the Oldwalls now. We get a bit more lore about them during the Bastard's Wound DLC, where we stumble upon a community of rogues, rebels, and refugees, making a difficult living within a portion of forgotten and partially submerged Oldwalls, making use of the law forbidding access as to avoid discovery.
How many people are hiding in these old walls? Should we take bets on brave or stupid? My rings are on stupid.
A very long and rather tedious quest chain here will take you through this portion of Oldwalls and reveal a set of murals, which depict a connection between the Oldwalls, beasts, and the Bane. The beasts, or beast folk as I call them, haven't really been part of the lore discussion because honestly, they're not super important in the overall narrative nor in the world per se. You do have a beast companion, of course, and their lore presence and relevance is only apparent in the Bastard's Wound. However, the issue we have here is twofold. On the one hand, to say the murals are ambiguous is an understatement. On the other hand, they are purposefully made so, likely as a general design decision for the DLC as a whole, because the main theme that runs through the Bastard's Wound is that of reinterpreting one's past so as to set themselves up for a better present. So the murals don't offer any clear lore, besides connecting the Spire-Builders with the beasts and Bane. The purpose of the murals in the narrative is to act as a semi-MacGuffin meant to spur on character development. That said, besides connecting the Spires and Oldwalls with the beasts and Bane, there is one other thing the murals do from a lore perspective, and this is where we return to the counter-argument I mentioned earlier. When trying to pin down the timeline of the Spire-Builders, I mentioned earlier some speculative eyeball approximations of the potential minimum age of the Spires and Oldwalls, and that the presence of magic on Terratus can throw a wild variable into the development of societies, so using our world as comparison isn't sound scientific methodology. Fair enough. However, the counter-argument is provided by the murals, which make it, at the very least, seem like the Spire-Builders had no written language. For a civilization capable of building several kilometer-tall buildings which funnel magic into the magical equivalent of weapons of mass destruction, not developing writing is a hard concept to grasp. Developing a written language is in general seen as a must-have step in a society's development to allow for both the capacity and the need to build great monuments requiring very advanced techniques and technology, such as the Spires and Oldwalls. What does this mean? Well, one possibility is that somehow they organized and built the things without needing to write things down, maybe using some form of innate magical telepathy which would imprint one's ideas into the minds of many, and they could perfectly recall those ideas at all times. One other possibility would be that the Spire-Builders became so advanced that they were using a completely alien sort of communication through the use of magic again. But there's another option, in which the Spire-Builders were around so long ago that all records of any type of writing were erased by the winds of time and magic. Maybe the Spire-Builders flew too close to their invisible magic sun and disappeared in a cataclysm of such power that it reshaped Terratus in ways even its current inhabitants are not aware of. One fact we do have is that nobody has sailed from one side of Terratus and reached the other. The game does refer to Terratus as being a planet, and it does have 2 orbiting moons, so we can be fairly certain Terratus is indeed a globe, though again, the presence of magic could undermine that. And this dovetails into an adjacent theory of mine. What if the Spires and Oldwalls actually brought magic into Terratus, or at the very least amplified it on a global scale to where it can be wielded by a decent percentage of the population? What if that was the initial purpose of the Oldwalls and Spires, to simply amplify the connection to wherever magic comes from, and before their existence, before the Spire-Builders, Terratus was either devoid of magic or it expressed itself in much subtler ways? Feel free to sound off in the comments with your thoughts on my thoughts. If you dug this video, I just need you to know this isn't what I normally do here. What I do is deep dives into retro PC gaming, with the occasional more philosophical sort of take on things. So if that interests you by any chance, make sure to check out the video on the left of your screen. If you'd like to support me, thank you. There's a link to Patreon on the right of your screen. And my GOG affiliation link is in the description. I've been Stephen Ansons, thank you very much for watching, good luck out there, and there's a hidden joke in a few seconds. Unrelated to anything, it appears the ancestors of the Tearsmen were the same as mine, the Dacians.